I think we were far away from the heavy metal thing, because that seems to have a, they're all quite.
With his schoolboy uniform, duck-walking across stages and tearing through riffs that shook arenas, Angus Young became one of the most iconic guitarists in rock history. As the lead shredder and co-founder of AC/DC, he helped define the sound of hard rock for over 4 decades. His lightning-fast solos, raw energy, and no-nonsense approach to music turned AC/DC into one of the biggest bands on the planet. But behind the stage persona and roaring amplifiers, Angus Young has always been known for one thing: his uncompromising attitude. He lives and breathes rock and roll, and when others don't share that same dedication, he doesn't hide his frustration. Over the years, stories have emerged of Angus clashing with fellow musicians, sometimes bandmates, sometimes rivals, and sometimes even icons of the rock world. To Angus, rock isn't about ego or image, it's about the music. And when egos got in the way, or when musicians pushed buttons he couldn't ignore, tensions flared. Some feuds burned out quickly, others lasted for decades, and a few left scars that never healed. Now, after years of whispers and backstage accounts, we're taking a closer look at the 6 musicians Angus Young reportedly couldn't stand the most. From explosive confrontations on tour to bitter rivalries with other rock legends, this list will shock even die-hard AC/DC fans. So, who made Angus Young's blacklist? And what really went down behind the curtains of rock history? When people think of Angus Young, the image that often comes to mind is a 5'2" powerhouse in a schoolboy outfit, duck-walking across the stage with a Gibson SG slung low. But behind that image is a man who never really wanted the trappings of rock stardom. Angus Young wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing sound. Born in Glasgow, Scotland in 1955 and raised in Sydney, Australia, Angus grew up in a working-class family where music was more than just entertainment. It was a way out. His older brothers, including George Young of the Easy Beats, paved the way by diving into the music business, showing Angus that rock could be more than a hobby. By the time Angus co-founded AC/DC with his brother Malcolm in 1973, his life's path was set. From the beginning, Angus stood apart. He wasn't interested in the celebrity side of rock and roll. Unlike many of his peers who indulged in wild parties and self-destructive excess, Angus kept his focus squarely on the music. He rarely drank, never touched drugs, and preferred staying out of the spotlight when the band wasn't on stage. While others chased fame, Angus chased riffs. This dedication made him both admired and at times difficult to deal with. Angus had little patience for musicians who let ego, laziness, or chaos get in the way of performance. To him, every concert was sacred, an unbreakable contract with fans. That philosophy created the backbone of AC/DC's legendary consistency: loud, simple, no-frills rock delivered with the same intensity, whether to 500 people in a club or 50,000 in a stadium. But it also meant Angus clashed with anyone who didn't share that ethos. Within AC/DC itself, he was fiercely protective of the band's sound. When lead singers or bandmates tried to push the group in experimental directions, Angus resisted. He believed AC/DC's power came from staying true to hard rock's core, not bending to trends or industry pressure. That uncompromising attitude was part of what made the band so successful, but it also fueled tensions that sometimes boiled over. Beyond AC/DC, Angus also grew weary of rival musicians who dismissed his straightforward approach to rock. While critics occasionally called AC/DC too simple, Angus wore that as a badge of honor. For him, rock wasn't supposed to be complicated. It was supposed to be raw, heavy, and fun. Musicians who sneered at that philosophy, or worse, who tried to undermine AC/DC, often landed on Angus's bad side. Even in his interviews, Angus showed flashes of his disdain for pretension in music. He mocked overblown rock stars who prioritized theatrics over talent, and he didn't hesitate to criticize those who, in his view, lost touch with the raw spirit of rock and roll. The result? A career marked not just by legendary performances, but by fiery conflicts with certain musicians. Some of these clashes came from inside his own band, while others were with industry titans who underestimated the little man in the schoolboy uniform. And when Angus Young had a problem with you, he didn't easily forget. As we'll see, Angus's reputation for staying true to rock came at a cost. He made enemies along the way, 6 in particular, who earned his lasting dislike. As AC/DC began their rise in the mid-1970s, Angus Young quickly discovered that the rock industry wasn't just about music. It was about egos, rivalries, and competition. While Angus remained committed to his stripped-down, no-nonsense style, many musicians from other bands looked down on him and his brother Malcolm for their refusal to evolve with trends. That arrogance became fuel for conflict, and Angus never forgot the slights. One of the first clashes came from within the hard rock community itself. Some musicians saw AC/DC's sound as too basic: 3 chords, loud amps, and little else. Progressive rock musicians, in particular, sneered at AC/DC's approach, believing their long, intricate solos and elaborate compositions were more sophisticated. Angus, however, laughed at this mentality. He famously said that when it comes to rock, if it's too complicated, you've lost the point. For him, music was about feel and energy, not complexity. That dismissive attitude toward pretentious musicians created lifelong enemies. Then came the critics. While AC/DC was winning over fans in droves, some high-profile musicians echoed the critics' sentiments, calling the band meat and potatoes rock or mindless barroom music. Angus took these jabs personally. He had enormous pride in the fact that AC/DC never needed studio gimmicks or flashy tricks to fill arenas. For him, the insults weren't just digs at the band, they were attacks on his core belief about what rock and roll should be. The tension reached a boiling point in the early 1980s, as AC/DC skyrocketed into superstardom with Highway to Hell and Back in Black. Suddenly, Angus wasn't just the little guy from Sydney. He was a global rock icon, and with that fame came an avalanche of envy. Rival musicians started accusing AC/DC of selling out because of their commercial success. Angus bristled at this hypocrisy, pointing out that many of those same artists craved chart success themselves but couldn't get there without changing their sound. AC/DC, on the other hand, never strayed from their roots. Another flashpoint was the constant comparison between Angus and other guitarists of his generation. While legends like Eddie Van Halen, Jimmy Page, and Ritchie Blackmore were praised for technical wizardry, Angus was often dismissed as a showman rather than a serious guitarist. That reputation infuriated him. Angus knew that what he lacked in virtuoso flair, he made up for in raw power, timing, and feel. The fact that some musicians overlooked that only deepened his contempt. Perhaps the most personal rivalries came from within the heavy metal scene. Bands that pushed darker, heavier sounds often mocked AC/DC's simplicity, claiming it wasn't real heavy metal. But Angus never wanted to be metal in the first place. To him, AC/DC was rock and roll, pure and simple. Those who tried to put the band into a box, or worse, ridicule them for not fitting neatly into one, only ended up on Angus's bad side. Even more complicated were his tensions inside AC/DC itself. While Angus and Malcolm were united in their vision, not every band member agreed. Lead singers, particularly, often clashed with Angus over creative control. These internal rivalries sometimes spilled out into the press, creating a storm of rumors and animosity. Angus wasn't one to air dirty laundry in public, but behind the scenes, he carried grudges longer than most. By the 1980s, Angus had developed a clear pattern. If you disrespected his music, his band, or his work ethic, you weren't just an irritant, you were an enemy. And over time, 6 musicians, in particular, stood out as the ones Angus Young truly could not stand. Angus Young rarely minced words when it came to his views on other musicians. Though he wasn't the type to start fights in the press, he also wasn't shy about calling out artists he thought were fake, pretentious, or outright disrespectful. Over the years, 6 names emerged as the ones Angus truly had little patience for. Musicians who clashed with his uncompromising vision of what rock and roll should be. Number 1. Johnny Rotten, Sex Pistols. Punk and AC/DC both exploded in the late 1970s, but the relationship between the two worlds was far from friendly. Johnny Rotten, frontman of the Sex Pistols, once mocked AC/DC as dinosaurs clinging to outdated rock tropes. Angus, who despised showboating attitudes, was enraged by Rotten's disrespect. To him, punk wasn't rebellion. It was laziness dressed up as art. The bitterness lingered for decades. Number 2. Eddie Van Halen. Van Halen. This one shocked many fans. Eddie Van Halen was hailed as a guitar genius, revolutionizing the instrument with his two-handed tapping technique. But Angus viewed Eddie with mixed feelings. While he respected his skill, he felt Eddie's flashy solos represented exactly what he hated about technical show-offs. The media often compared AC/DC and Van Halen, fueling the rivalry. Angus didn't want to compete, but he also refused to be overshadowed, calling AC/DC a rock band, not a circus act. Number 3. Axl Rose. Guns N' Roses. Though Axl would later front AC/DC for a brief period after Brian Johnson's hearing loss, Angus had long-standing issues with the Guns N' Roses frontman. Axl's reputation for showing up late, fighting with bandmates, and prioritizing ego over performance clashed directly with Angus's work ethic. While Angus admired Axl's talent, he had little patience for his chaos. When Axl joined AC/DC, Angus reportedly kept a firm grip on rehearsals, refusing to let Rose's unpredictability derail the band. Number 4. Gene Simmons, Kiss. Angus never hid his dislike of rock bands that relied more on image than music, and no band embodied that more than Kiss. While Simmons and AC/DC shared stages early in their careers, Angus was dismissive of Simmons's theatrical approach and constant pursuit of merchandising. He once quipped that AC/DC didn't need fireworks and clown makeup to sell records. The jab didn't go unnoticed, and tensions between the two camps simmered for years. Number 5. David Bowie. This one often surprises fans because Bowie and AC/DC moved in very different circles. Bowie's experimental style and glam rock aesthetic, however, stood for everything Angus rejected. In interviews, Angus suggested that artists like Bowie forgot about the rock in their quest for reinvention. Bowie, in turn, was rumored to have dismissed AC/DC as pub rock. The mutual disdain created an unspoken rivalry that highlighted Angus's devotion to rock fundamentals. Number 6. Yngwie. Malmsteen, known for his blistering speed and neoclassical shredding, Malmsteen represented the height of technical guitar wizardry. Angus, however, saw no soul in it. He once said of such players, "They're so fast you can't feel a thing." Though he never launched a personal attack, his attitude toward Malmsteen's style made it clear that Angus considered him the antithesis of real rock guitar. Each of these rivalries reflected more than personal dislike. They symbolized Angus's rebellion against what he considered the corruption of rock. Whether it was punk's disdain for tradition, glam's obsession with image, or shredder's fixation on speed, Angus planted his flag firmly in the ground. AC/DC would remain true to the raw, unpretentious spirit of rock and roll, but for all the clashes, Angus's hatred wasn't about jealousy, it was about philosophy. To him, these 6 musicians represented a betrayal of rock's heart, and that's something Angus Young could never forgive.